Hi, today we're going to go through the answers to the linking expressions exercise. It's quite a long exercise, so we're going to go through the answers pretty fast. I will stop in places to explain additional information. At the end of this video, we will look at some linking expressions which you should never use in academic writing. Okay, let's start. 1 furthermore, 2 in addition, 3 additionally, 4 moreover. But in fact, all 4 of these linking expressions can be used in any of these first 4 sentences. They all have the function of adding information to what was mentioned in the previous sentence. So they have the same meaning. One point I want to make about linking words which add information is that if you're writing a body paragraph and you've just finished with a couple of sentences about one piece of support, so one of your supporting arguments for your topic sentence, and you're about to move on to the next piece of support out of the 2 or 3 supporting arguments that you have in total, it isn't really suitable to just use a standard linking expression to add information just as your way of transitioning from one supporting argument to the next. Instead, you probably want to use a different way of doing that, and I've noted that on much of the homework which I've sent back to you, or am sending back to you, and I'll talk about that a little in the next video when we actually when you follow me writing a body paragraph. We'll now look at numbers 5 to 10 inclusive. Number 5, thus. An old-fashioned word but common in academic writing. It means and so, or as a result. Number 6 is a little different. It's a very old-fashioned word. But so an educated population helps to increase the standard of living of a whole nation, hence the desire of all interested parties to take steps to improve the education system. Notice the grammar after hence. You can then just have a noun phrase. You don't need to have a verb phrase as such. Okay. If you don't feel comfortable using hence, don't use it. It means therefore, as a result, etc. Number 7, therefore. So as a result. Because the water temperature was perfect for swimming, they went swimming. Number 8 is also quite old-fashioned, but very formal. His ballot paper had more than one cross on it, thereby rendering it invalid. So thereby means in this way. And notice it's followed here by an ing form. 9. Indeed. So indeed is a word which we can use for emphasis. I always like to say that it's a way that you can agree with yourself. It's something that you can use in different parts of a body paragraph. You can use it in the second sentence when you want to, at the start of the second sentence, when you want to already agree with yourself about what you've said in the topic sentence. You can use it pretty much throughout the paragraph, just obviously you don't want to write indeed all the time. And you can certainly use it in the concluding sentence as well. So it's a very flexible word. 10, however. However basically means but. Okay? I sometimes see people using however as their favourite linking word and then using it incorrectly, using it to mean therefore or using it to mean in addition. No, it means but, basically. However can also be found in other parts of a sentence. and even at the end of a sentence where it has the meaning of though. Numbers 11 to 17, and here we're definitely in the territory of contrasts and comparisons. Okay, 11, whereas. 12, in contrast. 13, by way of contrast. 14, nonetheless, or nevertheless. 15, nevertheless, or nonetheless. 16, as a contrast. And many of these contrast ones, by the way, can also occur in the other sentences. And 17, in comparison. Numbers 18 to 23. Despite having eaten, or in spite of having eaten, but not although. 19. They went sunbathing in spite of the dire weather forecast, or despite the dire weather forecast, but not although. 20. Upon reconsideration. So that's a fancy way of saying thinking about it again. 21. Jeremy was a tortoise. Although he walked slowly, he could still blah blah. In normal speech, we would often shorten although in this position to though. But notice later on when we look at though, that can't be replaced by although. Notice we cannot say despite or in spite of here. 22. In conclusion, so this would be in a 5-paragraph essay, this would be in the actual conclusion. In the paragraph number 5, we're not doing that this semester. But in conclusion, the claim that water is necessary to for life to exist appears to be credible. Okay. Number 23, and this is one way you could start a concluding sentence, so the final sentence of a body paragraph. In summary. So in summary, it can be suggested that the environment is negatively impacted through the use of aeroplanes, motor vehicles and coal-burning power stations. So I'm guessing that there was something about aeroplanes, motor vehicles and coal-burning power stations, which was part of the supporting arguments, and yeah, it's hard to tell just from this, obviously. Okay. 24. Teaching objectives can change even during the course of a lesson, depending on the student's prior knowledge. It is, though, reasonable for teachers to stick to their aims under certain circumstances. In this situation, though, has the same meaning as however. So obviously it can't be although, because although has a different meaning. 25. So in the first sentence we read something about pilots and periods of boredom. And actually, sometimes they even fall asleep. Anyway, in the second sentence we've got something about train drivers having problems with their attention as well on long journeys. Oh, these are quite similar, aren't they? Similarly. Okay. There is another word as well, likewise. But many people think that likewise is not formal enough for academic writing. So I suggest that you only use similarly. And then number 26. So we've got the hand problem. York is a historic city with buildings of a diverse aesthetic appeal. On the one hand, one can find some beautiful architecture, such as the buildings on the Shambles, whereas on the other hand, it can be claimed that some of the buildings from the 60s are somewhat less appealing. Oh, I wrote this a long time ago. I don't know why I wrote one can find. Obviously, we try to avoid using the word one. Anyway, on the one hand and on the other hand, in English we only really use this to show a contrast. In your work, I often see it being used just to add information. So make sure that if you do use on the one hand, whereas on the other hand, that you do have a contrast. However, in general, I would recommend that you try to avoid using this expression altogether. And the reason why is that people often forget about the other hand. And so they write on the one hand, and then there isn't another hand, and I can't tell you how many hours of my life I have wasted looking for the other hand in students' work over the years. Of course, on the other hand can stand by itself, but if you start with on the one hand, you absolutely have to have the other hand as well. Okay, so with all of these expressions, maybe you can take some notes, put some notes on your editing list for the expressions which you feel comfortable with and the expressions which you'd quite like to use, but you need to be sure that you're using them correctly. Yeah, so now let's look at some expressions you should never use. Never start a sentence with a simple conjunction such as and but. I suppose we could also have or on that list, or. And I think we could also have also on that list. I myself do sometimes start a sentence when I'm writing with also. However, many people think it's not formal enough, so it's best to be avoided. The second line, anyway, that's very conversational, but it's not something you would have in academic writing. The same goes for as you can see, which has the additional problem of having the word you in it. Okay, now I once saw a list of linking expressions which school children in Lower Saxony are supposed to be taught, and the following words were on that list. Oh dear. Apart from that, in addition to that. Well, let's start with in addition to that. I often see in addition to that, and I have no idea what to that relates to, what it refers to. So I ask you, I beg of you, do not write in addition to that. Very often, if we are referring to something we've just mentioned, we will actually use this rather than that. But I ask you just to say in addition, comma. Now, apart from that typically shows a contrast, and yet when people use it, they try to use it as if they're adding information. So, and also it's not formal enough, so just don't use apart from that at all. Okay? Remove it from your memory. And finally, besides. Oh god. 2 problems with besides. First of all, it's not formal enough. It's something we use when speaking. And secondly, it doesn't mean what you think it means. Okay? Let me give you an example of a piece of conversation. Oh, I'm really annoyed my friends didn't invite me to join them at that concert last Friday. And then another person says, well, they probably thought you were busy on Friday. Besides, you don't even like Justin Bieber. Or whoever, okay? So that person gave one reason, they probably thought you were busy. And then they said, besides, and here's another reason, okay? That's the meaning of besides. But anyway, it's colloquial. Don't use it. Okay, then everyone will be happy. Okay. I think it's good to be able to use a mixture of different types of linking words and linking expressions. I think that most people probably have their favourites, or at least the ones which they use most readily, the ones they feel comfortable with. And that's fine. You don't have to use all of the linking expressions we've looked at today. but you do have to make sure that you use them correctly. Okay. Right. See you next time.